Hello everyone. Today I'll be doing my very first game review on a game I recently finished on Twitch called Owlboy. Owlboy was released November 1st of 2016 by D-Pad Studios after a grueling 9 years of development. A pixel art platforming puzzle game, Owlboy received a lot of love in its featured time at PAX 10 in 2013 and was an IGF nominee for visual arts in 2010. Today I'll be kicking off my review platform by going over the game in two halves. First, we'll look at the game's presentation, including art, music, storytelling, and overall immersion. Second, we'll look at the gameplay, which will include things like controls, playability, bugs, glitches, and overall how the game handled. Without further delay, let's get right into it. I have to start by saying I had never heard of Owlboy until shortly before my initial play of it on my YouTube channel, and I had little to no expectations of it. It came recommended to me by a friend, and I thought it would be interesting to take a look at something new on the indie scene that seemed to be making a lot of noise. Upon launching the game, I wasn't impressed. The stylized art style didn't exactly jive with me. I didn't have anything against it, but I wasn't blown away. But quickly into the game, I found myself immersed enough to lose my commentary. The colors of the scenes played well with the atmospheric music, and I very quickly found myself invested in the story of Otis, the protagonist of the game. We're greeted with a typical beginning of a student and teacher relationship that seems normal at first, though it quickly becomes apparent that the game wants to give us the impression that the character is inept and even worthless, taunted by his failures and the people around him. An almost oppressive feeling falls over you within the first 5 minutes of the game, and you feel sorry for everything the character experiences, largely because it's your fault he has performed so badly, giving the player a feeling of inclusion in the self-given guilt of the protagonist. As the game goes on, you meet these colorful characters, each with their own unique art style and sprite design that gives them distinct personality amidst the beautiful backdrop of these floating land masses in a world that seems to be almost entirely aerial. And as the game goes on, it does a fantastic job of bringing these characters forward in scenes to give you a sense of fondness or perhaps distaste, but either way, you feel something. The game quickly takes on a tone of adventure and self-empowerment as Otis and his friends set forward to complete tasks that no one expects them to accomplish, and throughout the gameplay it becomes apparent that the story between the characters is as important, if not more so, than the happenings in the overall world. Friendship, heartbreak, betrayal, and joy are all words I'd use to describe the sensations as the adventure unfolds before you. From a robot pirate that wanted to be more, to a spider coping with the life he is given, you form a bond in this ever-expanding and captivating narrative that continues to drive home the points of cooperation and teamwork through gameplay and dialogue shared between the characters. The only real issue to take away from this otherwise stunning performance are small discrepancies. Inconsistencies in dialogue and characters that only appear once leave things feeling a bit open-ended. The vague wording used to describe the conflict of the overall plot makes it hard to truly grasp what is going on within the world, and threatens to distract from the immersion that had been built up to that point. In the end, you come to the realization that the game is a journey of perhaps the most emotional and beautiful kind, about facing the things that scare you, and having the strength to move forward, the compassion to forgive, and the courage to become something more, to do something more. All of which comes bundled in an ever-changing scenery depicted in a retro-stylized manner and orchestrated to the amazing soundtrack put together by D-Pad Studios that made you want to bring up the soundtrack on your way to work and remember the moments that accompany each beautifully conducted score. As far as presentation goes, I give the game full marks of 4 points. Sadly, this is where the game begins to lose its marks. While some leniency could be earned on the part of it being an indie game, I prefer to keep my outlook objective and would judge this game like I would any other game I've played. Overall, the game feels good in controls and comfortable on a controller, though I did not try it on a keyboard. I felt that at times, the game could not decide if I should be flying or not. A small headache was had over attempting to maneuver in the air, only to find myself momentarily stuck to the ground, or attempting to enter a doorway, only to learn my feet were slightly below the ground, causing me to fall to the next screen below me. Uncertain flight controls aside, the game handled combat fairly, and boss fights were actually interesting and progressively more difficult. Save for a rather frustrating minigame, the character moves and behaves as you might expect of a platforming game. with tight enough controls to make sure you're able to get from place to place with a minimal amount of controller throwing impulse entering your mind. The other problem I have to mention with the gameplay is how utterly broken the game becomes once you acquire the last member of your party. With the ability to grapple onto literally nothing, and have that nothing offer you invulnerability frames, any difficulty left in the game can be handled simply by switching to said character and spamming the grappling hook button until the danger passes. While not exactly what I might call an exploit, it does seem like a questionable design decision, given that boss battles up to that point had made the effort to be challenging, unique, and difficult. Before ending this section, I do have to give credit to the boss fights presented in the game. For a game that I took for a fairly low difficulty puzzle and platforming game, the boss fight showed a surprising amount of difficulty, or at least enough to make me grip my controller fully and sit up properly in my chair on the second or third go-throughs. Unfortunately, as previously stated, this all becomes undermined once you acquire the last member of your party. For an indie game, there are surprisingly few bugs and glitches, my only real complaint having to do with sometimes flighty mechanics and a self-defeating mechanism for the difficulty curve. For the gameplay, I give Owlboy half marks at 2 points. In conclusion, I can say that my experience was surprisingly enjoyable. For a game I had never heard of, I found myself counting down the minutes till I could grapple the next section of gameplay and learn what was going on. I found myself emotionally invested in the characters and the situations. I enjoyed my time on this journey and would easily recommend it to anyone who is looking for a short puzzle game with action and adventure elements, as well as anyone that can appreciate a good soundtrack. In the end, I give Owlboy 6 out of 8 points, and would definitely consider it worth the full price.